31st Gene Key. Sounding your truth. Programming partner, 41st Gene Key. Codon ring, the ring of no return, 3162. Physiology, throat, thyroid. Amino acid, tyrosine. The 31st shadow, arrogance. The World Wide Web of words. This 31st shadow and its various frequency bands really turn some fundamental human concepts upside down. You may note that these bands track all human evolution as it moves from a state of arrogance to a state of humility. The chances are that you, like the rest of humanity, have been conditioned to think of arrogance and humility in a certain way. The general conditioning says that arrogance is a negative trait and that humility is a positive trait. Since this 31st gift directly concerns leadership and influence, we are going to have to explore the real definitions of these two words, because the 31st gift of leadership sits like the fulcrum of a seesaw between the two of them. As one side of a binary genetic codon, known as the ring of no return, the 31st gene key is chemically bonded to the 62nd gene key. They both code for an amino acid in the body known as tyrosine. This genetic coupling is very interesting when we explore it a little further. The 62nd shadow is the shadow of intellect, and concerns the mental skill of manipulating language in order to try to understand our environment. In effect, this shadow encases you inside a world of language and words from an early age, projecting a mental neuro-linguistic map onto reality as you perceive it. It is because of the 62nd shadow that when you look at a tree, the word tree unconsciously forms in your mind. The 31st shadow extends this cognitive ability beyond the simple creation of a neurological map of reality. It uses this skill in order to control and manipulate others. The nice word we have for this is leadership. Because of the chemical bridge between these two shadows, humanity comes pre-programmed to follow those who can best manipulate language, facts, and words. In terms of leadership, we human beings operate very differently from animals. Animals choose their leaders instinctively based upon one animal having an alpha gene, which marks it as the leader. In humans, the alpha gene is present in the one who can best manipulate others through language. Such people may or may not have a strong moralistic character. That is immaterial. What is important here is that language is the medium through which human leadership is manifested. Furthermore, because language is the means through which frequency can be conveyed, at higher levels of frequency it can never lie. However, at the shadow frequency, language is the ultimate programming tool and can be used, for example, to blind an entire race of people to the truth, thereby locking them at a certain level of frequency. If we extend this concept of language as a programming tool even wider, we might say it is language that controls us rather than we who control it. There is a big difference between leadership and authority. Authority, the gift of the 21st gene key, is based upon the control of power through strength of will. These are people who do not lead through words, but whose sheer presence controls the will of others. In the case of the 31st shadow, words can have a far deeper effect than presence, since words endure forever. Concepts spoken thousands of years ago can still influence the whole inner reality of entire nations and peoples. We see this most clearly through the great religions. It is incredible to contemplate how even a single misplaced or mistranslated word spoken by a particular person can lead to the deaths of millions of people over thousands of years. That is the power of the 31st shadow at work. Why then is the 31st shadow called the shadow of arrogance, if it is language that really controls humans rather than the other way around? The reason is that the collective shadow frequency itself is arrogant. Human arrogance is rooted in the belief that we have any independent control over reality at all. We shall see when we come to the gift frequency that the real leaders among human beings are those who understand how deeply programmed and limited we are by our own intellect. At the shadow frequency, human beings are completely convinced by the mass programming of the society in which they live, and its collective history, beliefs, and culture. It is always the frequency that creates the language patterns, rather than the other way around. Our arrogance is based upon our belief that we can think, talk, or act our way out of the shadow frequencies, when in fact those very frequencies are created through our intellect. The real arrogance comes from being cut off from our divine source. Words that are not rooted in a profound sense of wonder are always at some level arrogant. Only the human heart can truly offer an answer to the mystery of existence, and unless your words carry the perfume of love somewhere behind them, they are still wading around in the shadow frequency. At the shadow frequency, humans think, speak, and act as if they were separate from nature, rather than being an organ of it. Nature controls human beings. Nature has evolved our intellect, and nature has ensnared us in our false mental reality, because that is where nature wants us to be at our current stage in evolution. Nature has even made us arrogant in believing that we have some control over nature. These truths may well seem difficult to us human beings with our deep mental investment in individual freedom. As we shall see, true humility has no basis whatsoever in behavior, but in understanding. You can only ever be free when you have escaped language, when you are no longer a victim of your own mental constructs and words. When the heart finally begins to speak, it organizes the words without you having to think about their meaning. The high frequency of the heart is what conveys the true meaning. The ring of no return describes the state of consciousness that lies far beyond words, even though it may use words as a means of vibrational communication. Arrogance, then, is a kind of addiction to words and language, rather than the frequency of the intention that hides between and behind the words. The modern world we see around us is nothing more than a mental construct created out of billions and billions of words. At the shadow frequency, we are trapped in this worldwide web of words. Matter itself may well feel solid to our touch, but we now know it to be ephemeral. The news headlines may seem to be deeply important, but even they are simply the working out of an evolutionary scheme of which humanity is but one small component. The 31st shadow, therefore, has drawn human beings so deeply into their own illusion, or Maya, that we cannot see how little influence we really have. Our new obsession with the environment and with trying to slow down our inexorable progress may well turn out to be unfounded. Our arrogance persists in assuming that we are affecting our environment instead of seeing that there is no distinction between the environment and us. Perhaps the environment needs us to mutate it so that it can mutate us. Perhaps nature is forcing us in the direction we are going because she has an idea that we have not yet glimpsed. Whenever a human being speaks without understanding the false mental fabrication in which they live, they speak from the 31st shadow. The Maya is only interested in strengthening itself through our thoughts and words. Rare indeed are words which come from a person who understands how false words themselves are. The programming partner of the 31st shadow is the 41st shadow of fantasy, and perhaps that is the word that really says it all. All words, opinions, and thoughts with which you identify are agents of the great illusion of your separate existence. Repressive nature, deferring. There are essentially two forms of arrogance, and the repressive form manifests as false humility. These are people who defer their power to others, thus deliberately setting themselves below them. These are really people who care deeply what others think of them, and more than anything, fear to be thought of as arrogant. Ironically, such behavior is designed to draw attention, even though it claims the opposite to be the case. In many ways, these people are even more arrogant than people with the reactive nature. Humility is seen by society as a highly prized and noble accolade, but this kind of false humility hides nothing more than fear. Reactive nature, scornful. The reactive side to arrogance is based on anger rather than fear, and emerges as a kind of haughty scorn. This more traditional brand of arrogance assumes itself to be above others because it sees how easily they are conditioned and can therefore be manipulated. What such people miss is how deeply they themselves are caught up in the same conditioning, since they have a deep-seated need for recognition. Unfortunately, no amount of recognition can ever feel good when it comes from those whom you take to be inferior, so these people remain scornful of the very people they influence. This in turn makes them even more angry and disrespectful of human beings. The 31st gift, leadership, heart branding. The gift of leadership is really a gift of influence rather than an inherent predisposition to be a leader per se. The real leaders in the 64 gift matrix are the people with a strong activation of the 7th gift of guidance at a genetic level. The 31st gift is known as the gift of leadership only because that is the projection of the collective upon this gene key. Deep inside such a person, there is little or no inclination to be a leader, and even less identification with feeling like a leader. It is, however, this very reluctance that sets such people up as leaders. The mass consciousness, as we have seen, is programmed to be led, but has no idea of how to pick a leader. Most of the time, the mass consciousness will choose leaders not for their policies or beliefs, but for their style. The 31st gift knows all about trends and patterns because it has an inherent understanding and mastery of language. These people, therefore, understand the openness of the collective and its need to be influenced and led. The difference between the 31st gift and the 31st shadow is that the 31st gift does not believe its own propaganda. This gift is no longer caught up in the fear of what others think, and if you want to influence people in a certain direction, this is a distinct advantage. The modern-day term for this is the spin doctor. The spin doctor spins the truth whichever way happens to suit one's audience. At the shadow frequency, this is all rooted in getting more personal recognition and/or more control or wealth. At the gift level, the higher frequency has already moved the person beyond the tight codependent dynamic of the leader and the led, or the shepherd and the sheep. At this level, you still play the game, but for a different purpose. Now your primary influence is to help others break out of the very same matrix in which you yourself were once caught. The 31st gift, like all the gifts, represents a huge step beyond the intellect and into the heart. Only the heart really perceives the collective suffering that comes from being marooned in your intellect at the shadow frequency. Thus, your natural urge is to help others escape that suffering in some way. Furthermore, since the 31st gift is the gift of understanding the masses and the language of the shadow frequency, it naturally uses this gift to help draw others out of the codependent victim patterns and relationships of the lower frequencies. The 31st gift still carries an agenda, but that agenda is to help people out of the narrow neuro-linguistic confines of their own conditioning. No one understands the specifics of conditioning quite like the 31st gift. The 62nd gift of precision, which we have seen is chemically linked to this gift, allows a person operating at this frequency to use very specific programming words and languages to deprogram other people's conditioning. Because the 31st gift has its finger on the pulse of the collective patterns of humanity, it can have enormous influence over large numbers of people. An artist or writer expressing himself or herself through this gift can create a work of art whose influence far outweighs its content. In our modern world, we can see how the specific release of a particular book or film at a particular time can have a vast impact on the whole planetary consciousness. In our modern communication-rich global culture, the 31st gift is really opening up more and more to its true potential. Certain human beings operating out of the 31st gift can literally become the voice of the collective. At the shadow frequency, they become the voice of our fears, whereas at the gift level, they become the voice of our creativity as well as the messengers of our future evolution. Along with its programming partner, the 41st gift of anticipation, the 31st gift naturally has an affinity with the future and is always expressing the cutting edge of consciousness in form. The secret to the 31st gift is the secret of branding. These are people who inherently know that the medium they use, whether it be music, art, science, literature, or simply the naked human voice, is really only the means of expressing a transmission that lies beyond words. The art itself carries the frequency encoded within it, but the frequency lies well beyond the words, colors, or tones themselves. In other words, all human expression is really nothing but branding. If you release the right brand at the right time in history, you will have a huge influence. This is why the 31st gift is founded upon the rock of anticipation. It always has to sense what is coming into the world next, and to do this, it has to be free from the old conditioning. It truly is the heart that separates the shadow frequencies from the gift frequencies, and in our current stage of evolution, the heart is the hottest frequency there is. If you want to really see the nature of success on the material plane, then the heart represents the cutting edge today. From the level of the heart, success is now reaching for a new definition. Life is no longer about individual success, but success as a collective organism. This is the direction in which evolution is currently taking us. One can therefore see from the 31st gift that a new era is opening up before humanity, and it is an era in which individual leadership is declining, while something we have never seen before is also occurring. The collective is beginning to lead itself. Those frequencies that really catch the heart of the collective are coming through as collective voices and expressions, even though they are transmitted by individuals. The point is that those individuals have little or no self-interest. It is truly an extraordinary age that we are moving towards, and it is only those ready to make the leap into the heart who will inherit the huge benefits coming to us all. The 31st Siddhi, humility, the ring of no return. If you happen to be excited at the words coming out of the 31st gift, then you may be in for a shock when you take the plunge into the 31st Siddhi. Humility, as we shall see, is not for the faint-hearted. It is therefore highly ironic that humility is a word that has come to be associated with people of a saintly or virtuous countenance. The irony here lies in the misunderstanding that humility has anything to do with behavior, because it does not. That kind of humility is usually arrogance in disguise. True humility can only occur at the Siddhic frequency, because it requires the complete obliteration of your individuality. The words humility and arrogance reflect a behavioral duality found in human beings, but they are also words with a highly moralistic charge. At the Siddhic level, all such morality is finished because your separation from existence is finished. If we look even more deeply into these two words, we can see that one, arrogance, represents an archetypal male characteristic, and the other, humility, represents an archetypal female characteristic. Such terms describe the universal polarity of being, rather than descriptions specific to men and women. One could even say that all energy behaves in an arrogant, probing way, whereas all matter is humble and submissive. Looking at life forms in this way, without any morality, allows both expressions their own integrity and beauty. It is in this sense that the 31st Siddhi is called humble, because, like the feminine pole, it represents non-existence. Out of non-existence, existence is born. Because the human intellect cannot transcend language at this level, we are using the language of the duality to express something that lies beyond the duality. The feminine pole comes the closest to describing this transcendence. To the 31st Siddhi, there is no longer the possibility of achieving anything independently from life. Thus, many human words and expressions cease to have real meaning. If a human being behaves in what others describe as an arrogant manner, the 31st Siddhi simply cannot comprehend this. To the 31st Siddhi, all behavior is seen as an impersonal manifestation of the totality, and there is no such concept as an independent doer. This is what arrogance really means. You misidentify with your individuality and assume you have power over life. Arrogance is really concerned with what others think, whereas humility truly doesn't care. This is why arrogance always tries to be humble. However, to be truly humble, you wouldn't mind others thinking you were arrogant. If this is giving you a headache, then that is what the Siddhic frequency always does to the intellect. Someone outside its sphere cannot possibly understand the 31st Siddhi. It is just too simple for the poor human mind, and it is deeply disturbing to human concepts of morality. The 31st Siddhi has exceeded all concepts involving levels and movement, and even the need for being in the heart. There is no need to be anywhere or do anything other than what you are doing. True humility arises from the truth that you cannot ever do anything wrong. Consciousness is enjoying its game through your life. No matter what you believe, achieve, or do, it is not you attaining it, because you are the great illusion. The person manifesting the 31st Siddhi does not even see human beings as divided into those who are awake and those who are asleep. There is no such thing as being enlightened or unenlightened to such a person. If there were, that would assume the existence of separate beings rather than the reality of one unbroken chain of consciousness. Because the 31st Siddhi is truly humble, it has no agenda. It is not necessarily interested in freeing people from their illusions, even though it may unwittingly do so. Such a being realizes that it is not possible to influence anyone in this world. It doesn't matter what such a person does in life. They are content to leave the world exactly as it is. Nonetheless, such a person still carries the same genetic coding that requires they speak from the cutting edge of consciousness. The only difference between the gift and the siddhi is that the gift level still identifies with evolution. They are still caught up in the game, even though it is at a level beyond fear. The 31st siddhi says whatever it must say, knowing that the words come from the collective and go back into the collective. It is not concerned with the effect of its words because it has no concept of words conveying any real meaning. The 31st siddhi is rooted in the ancient tradition of the oracle. The oracle is simply a voice box for the divine. It speaks without being attached or even interested in what it says. Whatever the oracle says is perfect, and its translation is also perfect. Words and language can be interpreted in so many different ways. This mysteriously named codon, the ring of no return, refers to the great initiatic leap from the 4th causal body into the 5th Buddhic body. See the 22nd gene key for further details. Once this leap in consciousness has been made, there is no possibility of return because your identity or ego will be erased. With your identity go all language and all words, concepts, facts, and names. Ultimately, this is the great step in which your name is dissolved. Once you have allowed the Siddhic frequency to command your voice, you have entered the first stage of divine embodiment. From this moment onward, whenever you use the word I, it is the voice of divinity itself speaking. Such speech is pure transmission. It uses words to indicate the path beyond words. That is the beauty of its paradox.